Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Diplomatic Center. There are no emergency drills scheduled today. However, in the event of an emergency, please remain calm as our ushers direct you. In keeping with health and safety standards during an emergency, you will be instructed by our health and safety personnel to proceed to the muster point, located at the southern car park. Please use the double doors opening onto the corridor, then proceed outside the Diplomatic Center. Please remember to use the handrails when descending the staircase or ramp. Proceed to the muster point and await further instructions from our health and safety personnel. Thank you for your attention and do enjoy today's proceedings.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We do expect the imminent arrival of the Honorable Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and we will then commence this evening's proceedings. Ladies and gentlemen, we now invite you to please stand for the arrival of the Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, the Honorable Kamla Persad Bissessa, SC. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for the playing of the national anthem of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on steel pan by Ms. Opal Murrell. Thank you, Ms. Murrell. Ladies and gentlemen, you may now take your seats. The Honorable Kamala Persad-Bissessar, SC, Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, Ms. Michelle Mouchette, UN Assistant Secretary General and Director, Regional Bureau of Latin America and the Caribbean for the United Nations Development Program, Senator the Honorable Dr. Kennedy Swarutsing, Minister of Planning, Economic Affairs and Development, Mr. Hugo Blanco, Resident Representative for Trinidad and Tobago, Aruba, Curacao, and Saint Martin for UNDP, Ms. Almudena Fernandez, Chief Economist for Latin America and the Caribbean, UNDP, the Honorable Jagdeo Singh, Speaker of the House of Representatives, Senator the Honorable John Jeremy, SC, Attorney General, Ministers and Parliamentary Secretaries of the Government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, His Excellency Alvaro Enrique Sanchez Cordero, Ambassador of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and Dean of the Diplomatic Corps, heads of missions and other members of the Diplomatic Corps, Senator Kenya Charles, Vice President of the Senate, members of the Senate, heads and representatives from international organizations, Ms. Natasha Barrow, Permanent Secretary in the Office of the Prime Minister and Head of the Public Service, Mr. Randall Karim, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs and Head of the Foreign Service, Permanent Secretaries and Deputy Permanent Secretaries, Air Vice Marshal Darrell Daniel, Chief of Defense, specially invited guests, staff of the United Nations system working in Trinidad and Tobago, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good evening all. Welcome to the Caribbean launch of the UNDP Regional Human Development Report 2025, entitled Under Pressure, Recalibrating the Future of Development in Latin America and the Caribbean. My name is Fain Richards, and I'm the Communications and Advocacy Officer at the United Nations Office of the Resident Coordinator here in Port of Spain. It is my honor to be with you as Master of Ceremonies this evening. Our conversation today takes place with putting people at the center. Every man, woman, and child having the chance to live a life of dignity, security, and opportunity. We need only look at the tremendous feats of Trinbago's very own 2025 World Athletics Championships javelin athlete Keyshawn Walcott, all the way in Tokyo, Japan, and our 2025 World Athletic Championships silver medalist in the 400 meters, Jareem Richards, to see the tremendous value of investing in our human capital. As we chart the course to deliver inclusive and equitable human development prospects, the Regional Human Development Report 2025 will offer the insights and the signposts that the region needs for Trinbagonians and indeed for all people of the Caribbean to thrive. To set the stage for this evening's proceedings, I now invite Minister of Planning, Economic Affairs and Development, Senator the Honorable Dr. Kennedy Swarutsing, to deliver opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Fane. And Honorable Prime Minister, just to tell you that that wonderful young lady is my niece. Honorable Prime Minister Kamla Prasad Bisesa, SC MP, John Jeremy, Attorney General, the Government of Trinidad and Tobago, other cabinet colleagues, members of Parliament, Ms. Michelle, let me get your name right. Ms. Michelle Marchette, the Assistant Secretary General, United Nations and UNDP Regional Cooperation, heads of diplomatic missions, parliamentary secretaries, members of the diplomatic corps, other senior government officials, distinguished guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. It is both a privilege and a profound responsibility to serve as Minister of Planning, Economic Affairs and Development under the vision set by our Honorable Prime Minister and to be part of this dynamic team. Today, we gather at a moment defined by global pressures, economic volatility, climate shocks, social fragmentation, and the relentless pace of technological change. These forces not only test our resolve, our creativity, and our compassion, but it pushes us beyond business as usual and demand fresh thinking, bold action, and unwavering commitment. That is why the Regional Human Development Report 2025, Under Pressure, Recalibrating the Future Development in Latin America and the Caribbean, is so timely and so vital. It is not just a report, it is a call to action, a reminder that development is not only about income or growth rates, but about multi-dimensional well-being. It challenges us to put people at the center of our strategies, to build resilience, and to ensure our economies serve humanity, not the other way around. In the Caribbean, we know what it means to live under pressure. As small island states, we face the front lines of climate change, financial shocks, trade disruptions. Therefore, resilience speaks to our capacity to withstand these global shocks and emerge stronger. Central to this recalibration is data. Data is the compass that guides our decisions, the evidence that shapes policies, and the mirror that reveals whether our strategies are truly improving lives. Without accurate, timely, and inclusive data, we are navigating in the dark. With it, we can identify inequalities, anticipate risks, and measure progress in a way that is transparent and accountable. Data empowers us to ensure that no community, no family, and no individual is invisible in our national development story. And resilience is strengthened when decisions are informed by reliable data. Data on disaster risk, food security, health outcomes, education access, and environmental challenges. This data helps us to understand where vulnerability lies and how best to direct resources so that we build stronger systems and protect those most at risk. In Trinidad and Tobago, we are defined not by our challenges, but by how we respond to them. That is why this government, under the leadership of the Honorable Prime Minister, has been moving with urgency, reforming public procurement, advancing e-government, digital payments, strengthening safety and security, and putting food security and climate action in the heart of our economic diversification strategy. The RHDR calls us to think beyond the immediate, to plan not only for growth, but for human flourishing. It challenges us to put resilience at the core of our development playbook. As the Prime Minister said during the campaign, we must build not just for today, but for the Trinidad and Tobago our children deserve. A nation that bends but does not break. Planning is the bridge between aspiration and action, but data is the foundation that makes planning credible, targeted, and effective. Together, they transform hope into reality. We are building systems that are robust, yet adaptable, institutions that embrace complexity, and infrastructure that empowers our community. Above all, we are committed to closing the economic, geographic, and social gaps that have left too many behind. Resilience is not only about surviving hardships, it is about enabling people to thrive, exercise agency, and to shape their own futures with dignity and confidence. The Regional Human Development Report 2025 is a roadmap to a more just, inclusive, and resilient future. Let us heed its call, not just as policymakers, but as fellow human beings, beyond or bound together by hope, by duty, and by a shared responsibility to the generations yet to come. Let us recalibrate our development with data, with planning, and above all, as our Prime Minister continuously asks us to do, with people at our center. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, for reminding us that when we think of development, we cannot only quantify it in terms of the economy of growth rates, that we must indeed put people and resilience of our human capital at the forefront. And with the annual publication of its Human Development Report for Latin America and the Caribbean, the United Nations Development Program reaffirms its commitment to shifting the focus from economic growth to human thriving. At the forefront of UNDP's dedication to producing this data and analysis that the Minister referenced for the Latin American and Caribbean region is a woman who has dedicated her career to social policy and global development, notably as Minister of Social Development in Panama, where she developed the first national multi-dimensional poverty index, and in another incarnation as a senior public policy advisor and executive education director for Oxford's Poverty and Human Development Initiative. There, she advised governments and policymakers in Africa, Asia, and Latin America on strategies to address multi-dimensional poverty. Please join me in welcoming UN Assistant Secretary General and Director of the Regional Bureau for Latin America and the Caribbean of the United Nations Development Program, Ms. Michelle Mouchette, to deliver the keynote address.
Honorable Prime Minister, members of Cabinet, distinguished guests, colleagues, and friends, all protocols observed, good evening to everyone. It is an immense privilege that I already conveyed to the Prime Minister to be here in Port of Spain, Trinidad and Tobago, for the launch of UNDP's flagship Regional Human Development Report 2025, titled Under Pressure, Recalibrating the Future of Human Development in Latin America and the Caribbean. Allow me, please, to begin with a heartfelt thanks, Prime Minister, to the members of Cabinet that are here with us, and to the people of Trinidad and Tobago for hosting in such a warm way, and for your visionary leadership in advancing resilient human development, not only at home, but across the Caribbean region. My gratitude also goes to the incredible staff from UNDP Multi-Country Office in Trinidad and Tobago under the leadership of our resident representative, Hugo Blanco, and of course to our chief economist at UNDP in Latin America and the Caribbean, Almudena Fernandez, who has been the intellectual lead of the report that today we present to you and to the region. Excellencies, dear friends, we gather here at a time in which our region is under pressure. A pressure that decision makers feel in a particular way and with particular intensity. It's very clear that our development trajectory has reached to an inflection point, as we were discussing previous to this launch. After significant progress, because there has been significant progress, this began to stall, even before the pandemic. And today we know is extremely vulnerable to setbacks. In a context of geopolitical shifts, persistent structural vulnerabilities, accelerated transformations, and recurrent crises of diverse nature, one thing is very clear: more of the same won't be enough to redirect our development trajectory. As UNDP, we firmly believe this is also a time for opportunity, if we manage to effectively channel this pressure as a force for transformation. That's why today, more than a report, we are proposing a paradigm shift to embed resilience at the core of development efforts, not as a byproduct of development, but as a central priority. And I know this might not sound as novel for the Caribbean region, where resilience is not an abstract concept, but a lived reality that defines in great way how nations, societies, communities, and individuals confront daily pressures and research after these pressures, from floods and sea level rise to volatile energy markets, organized crime, mounting external debt, just to mention a few of these compound of crises. The report draws from these lived experiences to propose a new perspective and analysis to create future-oriented opportunities and development solutions. That's why we are here, because we are looking for those solutions. These are grounded in a solid conceptual framework, supported by specific policy tools, and offer a guideline to recalibrate the future of development, arguing that development without resilience is insufficient, or even worse, no longer viable. It introduces the notion of resilient human development as an evolution of the concepts addressed in previous UNDP reports, which Madam Minister is very familiar with, and probably several of you, such as human development, human security, agency. The human development approach, as Minister reminded us, is very explicit regarding the fact that development can't be measured only by income, but by the freedoms people enjoy. The freedom to live healthy lives, to learn, to generate income, and to fully participate in society. Resilience, under this perspective, means ensuring these freedoms are protected and expanded, even and especially when crises arise. It means making that hurricane does not wipe out decades of progress, that economic shocks do not push families into poverty, that social fragmentation, polarization, and insecurity does not erode the civic space and voice of citizens, but on the contrary, to provide people, communities, and institutions with the resources and the mechanisms, with the capabilities to adapt, to innovate, and to shape their futures and thrive, even amid the stormy weather. As already said before, this effort doesn't end in a diagnosis. It provides rigorous, data-driven analysis that trust will be extremely useful for the National Statistics Institute the government is intending to create, and calls for a new development playbook built around 3 I's framework of resilience: instruments, institutions, and infrastructure. Instruments such as smarter policies and tools that anticipate risks, protect people, and direct resources where they are needed the most. Institutions that are inclusive, transparent, and accountable systems that earn trust and can respond effectively in moments of crisis, such as the UNDP-EU alliance that goes in line with the Antigua and Barbuda Action Plan for SIDS to enhance risk governance, early warning systems, and crisis preparedness. Infrastructure, both physical and digital that connects communities, withstands shocks, and expands opportunities for growth and inclusion. And in this regard, let me commend Trinidad and Tobago efforts that put the country at the forefront of the digital transformation in the Caribbean. And as UNDP, we're extremely proud and honored for trusting us in walking this path with you. Finally, and as we discussed, Prime Minister, a few minutes before starting this launch, to translate these tools into tangible development results, that is exactly what decision makers need and want. The report also provides decision makers with a set of tools to orient evidence-based policy, new indexes, microsimulation methods, as well as a facility for financing resilient human development, all ready to deploy, about which our chief economist will expand later on her presentation. Dear friends, with this introduction, it's very clear that today building resilience is not optional, it's an imperative in the world we live today. And it's a shared responsibility. Individuals should not be left to shoulder risk alone. Governments cannot manage them in isolation. The private sector cannot innovate in a vacuum. And international partners cannot just borrow solutions from outside. Nor does the resilience emerge automatically as a byproduct of growth or poverty reduction. It must be built through concrete action, innovation, dialogue, and the most important, trust among different sectors and actors in a society. And it requires something that is absolutely essential. It requires hope. The conviction that a better future is not only possible, but it's within our hands. And today, I stand here in front of you with firm hope, knowing that the report we are launching today has the real potential to shift the development paradigm in the region, just as previous UNDP's human development reports have done in the past 30 years. And this hope increases exponentially with the high-level commitment sitting in this room. Madam Prime Minister, distinguished members of Cabinet, please rest assured, as I already conveyed to you, that you can count on UNDP's 6 decades of experience, the best of our global and regional expertise, and a robust set of policy tools and instruments to support Trinidad and Tobago's national development vision, aligning planning, finance, and governance. For this, we remain committed to working hand in hand with other UN agencies, and I take the opportunity to salute Joanna Casana, coordinator of the UN system based here in Trinidad and Tobago, partners such as CARICOM, European Union, Japan, IDB, GEF, and some more others sitting also here in this room, and of course, the private sector. Prime Minister, Trinidad and Tobago can lead the way forward towards a resilient human development, and UNDP would be honored to walk that path with you. Hugo and the team from our country office based here on the ground have all the support from my side as ASG and Regional Director to immediately put hands to work upon your request and guidance, because the recalibration of the future of development begins today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ASG Mouchette, who reiterated very articulately the extent to which Trinidad and Tobago is a regional leader when it comes to investing in and unlocking the potential of its people. As ASG mentioned, the government of Trinidad and Tobago has reaffirmed its commitment to equitable, inclusive human development, a commitment that has convened this very distinguished audience of policymakers, parliamentarians, and development partners here this evening. It is only when such a commitment emanates from the very highest levels of national leadership that our shared vision for human progress and prosperity can be achieved. To outline the government of Trinidad and Tobago's strategic vision for human development, I now invite to the stage the Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, the Honorable Kamla Persad Bissessa, SC.
Thank you all very much. Thank you. Faye, thank you very much. Being such a good representative of Trinidad and Tobago this evening, little knowing that you were none other than the niece of our Honorable Minister. That makes it even more pungent. So thank you so much for chairing our proceedings. And I think you will forgive me if I don't do the whole list of salutations, because there's so many distinguished people who have joined us here this evening. Let me acknowledge our cabinet ministers, our parliamentarians, our senators. Please, thank you all for joining us. I know we had a long day in cabinet for the entire day, so it is so good that you can be here with us today. And I welcome as well Excellencies of the Diplomatic Corps. Thank you very much for being here. Can we give them a warm welcome, please? Of course, we have also senior public servants with us. And I really want to say a special, special welcome to Ms. Michelle Bouchette. I hope I got it right, just like Minister Swarat Singh. Thank you for being here. I know that we were supposed to be the second launch. I was a bit disappointed when I met Mr. Branco, your permanent rep here, and I shared that story with you a while ago, Excellency. I was a bit disappointed because I wanted to be first. I think we all want to be first. Just like Kishon Walcott, let's give Kishon #1 in the world a round of applause. Thank you. And of course for Jareem, who has also made Trinidad and Tobago so proud. So we wanted to be first. But I say God works in mysterious ways, the wonders to behold, because we came second because of the timing. We had just come into government and the timing went differently. So when I shared this story with Her Excellency, yes, you're here with us, she said, never mind. I didn't go in person to the first one. So Trinidad and Tobago is indeed the first for her being here in person. I salute also here Permanent Secretary, Head of the Public Service, Ms. Barrow, and all the other Permanent Secretaries who have joined us. And I want to share another story as I continue. Say good evening to you. They say leadership in this very modern era must rest on 3 anchors. 1, courage to act when the path is unclear. Discipline to prepare before the next wave strikes. And the imagination to design solutions fit for tomorrow, not for yesterday. We can't govern looking back in the rearview mirror. We must design for tomorrow. It is this conviction that Trinidad and Tobago is proud to host this regional launch of the HDR 2025. For in times of upheaval, these reports are more than just numbers. They are a compass reminding us that true progress is measured not in GDP alone, as you mentioned, but in the quality of our classrooms, in the strength of our healthcare, in the fairness of our justice system, and in the dignity of our people. And so, as I share with you this evening, the reports really a dire warning to all of us in the region, in Latin America and in the Caribe. It gives us a dire warning, but there's also a lot in it that gives us hope. Trinidad and Tobago, our place among the very high human development nations, was earned through sacrifice, investment, and resilience. But it is slipping, and this is a warning. We cannot rest. We must act with urgency, we must act with vision, and we must act with resolve. Across Latin America and the Caribbean, the pattern is clear. We have made progress, but we remain very fragile. In just one generation, poverty was cut by half. Yet today, 1 in 4 people in our region still live in poverty, and another 1/3 live so close to the edge that a single shock can just push them over. The Human Development Index, which once rose steadily year after year, slowed sharply in mid-2010s. Then came COVID-19, which caused the first decline in the index in our history. Recovery since then has been uneven and uncertain. Today, our region faces uncertainty, levels that are higher than the global, 50% higher than the global average. And the truth is, crises no longer come one at a time. That is what this report rightly calls a polycrisis. The conclusion is undeniable. Business as usual is no longer an option. Here in the Caribbean, we live these contradictions every day. Growth is recorded in reports, yet inequality continues and endures in our households. The report highlights 3 great stressors pressurizing us, as the report tells us about pressure, and re-entity to know about pressure. The report gives us 3 great stressors pressing upon us all. But let me just share something with you. Mr. Blanco has been working with us for a while now. When I met him, and he came to ask about, can we launch the report here? I told you that part of the back story. And I said, well, what is in that report, Mr. Blanco? He said, there is a good news and there is a bad news. And he said, but never mind. If we have the willpower and we want to do it, we can get it done. And so the report gives us a roadmap to getting human development, sustainable development going. So what are the 3 stressors that this report shared with us? Technological disruption, social fragmentation, and climate emergency. From these mounting pressures, we must chart a new path of resilient human development. We must have a model where progress is not fragile, where a single crisis cannot erase decades of hard work, and where every gain is protected and shared. This vision calls for action we can all understand, such as protecting small states through debt for climate swaps, and catastrophe-linked financing, building regional value chains in food, in health, in the creative industries, the renewable energy sector, and so our economies can grow together. Expanding carbon risk pools and early warning systems to shield our communities from natural disasters before they strike. Confronting cross-border crime with stronger intelligence sharing, coordinated maritime security, and recovery strategies that rebuild trust in communities and the affected. In this way, resilience stops being a slogan. Instead, it becomes a safeguard for our people, our region, and our future. The global challenges outlined in this report have their own Trinbagonian face. Yet even as we confront these pressures, we must also recognize the immense potential that is before us. Digital transformation, artificial intelligence, and new technologies are not mere tools. They are accelerators of human development. When harnessed responsibly, they can expand access to education, they can improve public services, and they can create new pathways of opportunity. But if we fail to act, they can also deepen our divides. Our national strategy must enshrine digital access, AI governance, and innovation ecosystems that empower every citizen. TNT today then is so proud to host this Caribbean launch. It is not only a formal event, it is a reaffirmation of, excuse me, it's a reaffirmation of our unwavering commitment for sustainable development, inclusive development, and much mentioned people-centered government. My government is committed to building mechanisms that help us navigate uncertainty with clarity and purpose. We will construct institutions that embrace complexity and respond with agility. We will invest in infrastructure that empowers communities in Trinidad and in Tobago. We will create an environment where every citizen in every community feels safe, feels seen, feels heard, and above all, to be known that you're seen. We see you, we hear you. And this is what we will endeavor to do. These are not abstract policy goals. They are the foundations of a prosperous future, or TND, and of sustainable development for a whole region, the Caribbean region, and Latin America. They are reflected in the Regional Human Development Report 2025, launched today, under the title, as you've heard, Recalibrating the Future of Human Development in Latin America and the Caribbean. I want to sincerely thank you again, UNDP, all your staff here on the ground, and I told you, Mr. Blanco and his team have been working very closely with us. And I was very pleased today to be informed that since our meeting, Mr. Blanco, that about 12 of my ministers met with you and other members of the UN family here in Trinidad and Tobago for us to thrash out, for us to work out the way forward. I think they deserve a round of applause. So again, I sincerely thank UNDP. I thank its leadership. I thank its experts, excuse me, and of course, for years of partnership. I asked Mr. Blanco today, how long have you been in Trinidad and Tobago as UNDP? He says, guess what? 63 years, as we celebrate our 63rd anniversary of independence. So they've been with us since our independence in 1962. The UNDP has walked alongside us in building schools, in strengthening governance, in advancing digital transformation, and now in charting a future of resilience. Their work is not just analytical, it is practical, people-centered, and enduring. For this, on behalf of my government and the people of Trinidad and Tobago, we extend our gratitude to you and your teams. We look forward to continuing this journey together, turning evidence into action and vision into reality. As I close, I note the title again, Under Pressure. My pledge is this, that under pressure, TNT will not retreat. We will lead. Will you lead with us? Thank you for sharing and partnering with us. We will not retreat under pressure. To UNDP and Ms. Mouche, I extend gratitude for the rigor of this report. To Mr. Blanco, I thank you for the candor of your message, reminding us of both our achievements and our unfinished business. Now it falls to all of us, the governments, civil society, the private sector, our youth and our diaspora, and our allies around the globe to act with courage, to act with imagination, and to act with faith. Together, let us turn risk into resilience, pressure into progress, and uncertainty into opportunity for TNT and for the region, and indeed for all humanity. I thank you again, members of the UNDP team. We're very happy to have you here. Thank you very much. And finally, I want to thank Honorable Minister Kennedy Swarat Singh for the great work that he's been doing and leading this charge in our partnership with UNDP, and we look forward to many more such meetings and cooperation. God bless you all, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister. As has been mentioned so often this evening, the data and analytical insights in the 2025 Regional Human Development Report for Latin America and the Caribbean are a treasure trove of material which can shape policy and steer programming. To walk us through the key findings of the Regional Human Development Report, I now invite Almudena Fernandez, Chief Economist at the UNDP Regional Bureau for Latin America and the Caribbean, to deliver an overview presentation.
Honorable Prime Minister Kamla Persad Bisesar, distinguished members of Cabinet, members of Parliament, distinguished members of the Diplomatic Corps, guests and friends and colleagues, thank you so much for joining us today in the presentation of this report. It is for us very important to be launching this in the Caribbean, since the Caribbean has been a region that has deeply inspired the analysis, the recommendations, and the call to action that this report brings to the table today. I want to start by thanking our country office here in Trinidad and Tobago for supporting us in the organization of this event, our UNDP team in Latin America and the Caribbean, which has contributed to this report in many, many ways, big and small, and to the team that wrote this report with me that has been working tirelessly for many months to bring this analysis and these recommendations to you. So we started this report with a simple question. In a region where we feel that individuals, communities, policymakers, societies are feeling more and more under pressure, how do we make sure that development progress continues and that we can accelerate progress towards human development? So that was the starting point on this report. What do we say that development is under pressure in Latin America and the Caribbean? What we see when we look at the Human Development Index, which is the index that UNDP puts forward every year that combines measures for income, health, and education, is that the Caribbean and Latin America for decades made sustainable and very fast progress towards achieving very high human development levels. Trinidad and Tobago, as Prime Minister already mentioned, achieved very high human development levels about a decade ago. But what we see is that even before the pandemic, around the 2010s, mid-2010s, this progress started to slow down. Then we were hit by the pandemic, the first time as a region that there was a reversal in terms of human development. But now progress is very slow. We're almost at a standstill. So the question is, how do we make sure that we continue to advance towards sustainable development? Importantly, we also saw across the region that poverty was reduced significantly. We reduced poverty from about 50% to 25% of the population. But the one thing that we care about, and this is important, is that although we were able to reduce poverty significantly, there's a group hovering right above the poverty line that is considered vulnerable, that it's vulnerable to fall back into poverty in the event of any adverse event happening. That group we have not been able to make smaller. So around 30% of the population of Latin America and the Caribbean today remains vulnerable to falling back into poverty. That means that more than half of the population of the region today doesn't have the adequate mechanisms to withstand a shock or a crisis if these were to happen. So one key analysis of the report is that we see in the Caribbean, and we also see in Latin America, that there has been significant progress, but this progress has been unequal. We see progress across averages, but when we look at the data disaggregated by local level, we see this progress has been quite unequal. We also see that it's slowing down, which is something we worry about, and it is vulnerable to reversals in the event of any shock. And why do we care about this today more than ever? Because we see that uncertainty is increasing across the world, across Latin America, and across the Caribbean. Although levels of uncertainty in the Caribbean are below those of Latin America and those at global levels, what we see in the Caribbean is that there's a lot of spikes on uncertainty around either extreme weather events or other shocks that happen. We see the Caribbean is constantly spiking in terms of the shocks that it withstands. And we care about this uncertainty not only because when shocks happen, reversals happen in terms of our development progress, but also because in uncertainty, in living with this fear, there is a deterioration of the agency of people, the capacity of people to imagine a better future for themselves, to imagine a better future for their kids, to invest and work towards that better future. A deterioration in agency, it's at its core a deterioration in human development. So uncertainty matters even if shocks do not manifest. And we also see that this is manifesting in a deterioration of mental health across the region. We've seen a surge in cases of anxiety and cases of depression across the region in the last decade. And what we see in the Caribbean and in Latin America and the Caribbean in average is that this is even above global levels. So that is why we say today in this report, that's why our call to action is that human development without resilience is no longer viable. We can not only worry about frequent and are more intense as they come. So the patterns of the past that used to be useful to manage those risks are no longer that useful. But we also see those risks now combined with novel threats, with threats that are emerging from transformations that are deeply affecting the dynamics of our societies, transformations that have to do with very rapidly evolving technologies, transformations that have to do with societies that are more and more fragmented, and transformations that have to do with a climate emergency, an increasingly changing climate that is affecting the lives of people every day. For example, in the Caribbean, we see, if we take the last 20 years, the average number of extreme weather events is double that any period before that. The number of extreme weather events has increased significantly in the Caribbean and the rest of the region as well. And not only that number has increased, so have the cost and the impacts these have on people. For example, if we look at the period from 1960 to 2000, and we look at the event with the highest cost, we see that the cost of that event was 100% of GDP of the country where it happened. If we look at the years between 2000 and 2023, which is the latest data that we have for this report, we see that the event with the highest cost reached 250% of the GDP of the country. So we see that the impact of these events are increasing significantly. We also see that the number of people impacted by these events increases exponentially over time. Interestingly enough, we see that there's a false dichotomy sometimes when thinking about climate change and economic growth. But in the Caribbean, it's interesting, much more so than the rest of Latin America and the Caribbean. What we see is that 1 in 3 people in the Caribbean do not see a need to prioritize between the environment and economic growth. These are things that can happen together. This is a much larger portion of the population in the rest of the region, and I think it has to do with the fact that people here live that dichotomy day to day. We understand that progress has to happen at the same time. Another of the pressures that we explore in this report has to do with rapidly evolving technologies. Technology, of course, has the potential to be a driver of development across the region, but what we see right now is that it tends to be implemented in an unequal fashion. However, what we see here in Trinidad and Tobago is that this country is a champion in terms of digital inclusion. We see that its levels of connectivity across the territory are similar to those of more advanced economies and are much higher than those of Latin America and the Caribbean on average. But what we see when we look at not only connectivity, but the actual skills that are required to use these digital technologies to improve lives, and the type of infrastructure that is a little bit more sophisticated that is needed to use these technologies to improve productivity and industry, is that on average for a region, we're falling far behind the more advanced economies. So this unequal expansion of connectivity and digital is important. We also see that there's a lot of opportunities in terms of using artificial intelligence to improve the delivery of services to people. And actually, Trinidad and Tobago is one of 7 Caribbean countries that are already incorporating AI algorithms in their delivery of services. And I know that this country now has a ministry for public administration and artificial intelligence, which is very significant. The report looks at the opportunity this can bring in terms of expanding services for the population, but also talks about the importance of understanding how not to make these algorithms reproduce any discrimination or social norms that they can bring with them. In terms of, this is an interesting case because in terms of political polarization, what we see across the world is that political polarization is increasing across the world. Every region of the world now has more political polarization, but what we see in the Caribbean is this is stable and standing still and is much lower than in the rest of the world. This is data, of course, until 2023, and things are evolving, but it's important to understand that this is a region that has some stability in terms of polarization. But we also see through Social Cohesion and Reconciliation Index that UN carried out, that there is a lot of space for improvement in terms of tolerance across groups and groups being able to live together in social cohesion. We see that there's some groups that are still suffering from discrimination and intolerance. Another issue that we analyze in this report is issues around crime. Organized crime is something that has grown across the region, and what we see, for example, today is that in the Caribbean, 59% of all homicides are related to organized crimes. In Latin America and the Caribbean, on average, this is 50%, but these are percentages that are much higher than in the rest of the world. We also see that in the last decade or so, up until 2023, homicides in the region have increased significantly in the Caribbean, while they have maintained it's pretty stable in other parts of the region. So after looking at all these pressures, what the report brings to the table is that we need a new development playbook. We need a playbook that is apt for our times, that converses with the uncertainty that we live in. And that's why we propose the 3I framework that has already been mentioned by our previous interventions. Instruments to deliver a social policy that have resilience at its core, institutions that can facilitate resilience, and infrastructure that can connect and bring resilience to the populations. And all of that have to have a few things in mind. One, we need instruments, institutions, and infrastructure that can prepare for the unknown. A lot of the risks, a lot of the uncertainty, a lot of the shocks that we're seeing are not things that we were able to foresee. They're happening and are unprecedented. So we need to be able to have capacity to plan in a more uncertain context. They also need to be able to respond to the shocks where they happen, when they happen. They need to have flexibility and adaptability to be able to respond. And finally, they need to have a component of being able to address those populations that have been hit by different crises and allow them to rebound and flourish. Many times after an emergency passes, some populations are left behind. So how do we make sure that this doesn't happen? And to be able to present some concrete actions, as Michelle mentioned, and bring those to the table, the report comes with a set of tools. And this is a set of tools that are not meant to be implemented one by one, but the idea is to provide a menu of options that can really help the planning process of countries that are interested in moving towards this trajectory, towards more resilient human development, so we can supplement those around the instruments, institutions, and infrastructure. At the center of these tools is a facility for financing resilient human development, which we hope will bring different actors to the table for mobilizing resources, but also cooperation across South-South and being able to bring knowledge around these issues. We also have a series of other knowledge products that talk to some of the aspects of the report. We have an atlas on artificial intelligence for Latin America and the Caribbean that kind of creates a roadmap of how to move towards more artificial intelligence in the region. And we have a set of microsimulations that can look at the planning process of how to address some of the deprivations in different areas of development, and how do we make sure that we can spend more concretely into the areas we want to improve. So I'll leave the set of tools. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Fernandez. Tonight's conversation has been both rich and inspirational. So how we activate, how we collaborate, and how we forge a resilient path forward will be essential from here on out. To share closing reflections and illuminate possible next steps, I invite UNDP Resident Representative for Trinidad and Tobago, Aruba, Curacao, and St. Martin, Mr. Hugo Blanco, to the stage.
Thank you very much, Fane. Honorable Prime Minister, querida Michelle, dear Minister Sarat Singh, Attorney General, thank you for being with us. Members of the Cabinet, members of the Parliament, permanent secretaries, diplomatic corps, friends, colleagues, UNDP team, colleagues from the IFIs. Thank you very much for being with us today. I have the pleasure to give closing remarks. I have noticed three key elements that I think are good takeaways. We have heard the word resilience many times. I think that one of the key messages is that resilience must be at the core of development. I think Michelle mentioned it. If there is not resilience, it's not going to be development. Before we used to say, if it's not sustainable, it's not development. Now, if it's not resilient, it's not development. And the report makes it clear, makes very clear that it's not about just surviving. It's about creating spaces where people, communities, citizens can thrive, despite this crisis, this polycrisis the Prime Minister mentioned. Building resilience requires investing in people, requires decisions, strengthening institutions, ensuring that no one is left behind. No one left behind, regardless where they live, even if they live in rural areas, in faraway communities. The second key message I have heard over and over is data. And this is something we have discussed with Minister Svaratsin many times. The Human Development Report for the region is a call to action. We have to have the data, we have to use it, we have to analyze it. And it's going to be a compass to recalibrate, to measure if what we are doing is making the results, so we can adjust. If we don't have the data, we don't know if we are going in the right path. And this means embracing, as Almudena just said, digital transformation, fostering innovation, and ensuring that planning is grounded in the life of the people we are planning to serve. It's not just statistics. And the third element I have noted is a question: can we transform pressure into opportunity? I think the answer is yes. While this region faces profound pressures, climate, technological, economic, social, these challenges can also serve as catalysts for transformation. The future will be defined not by the crisis, and I think Minister Sauratsin mentioned, is by how do we respond to them, and with the leadership we are seeing in this room, the collaboration and the relentless focus on human development, we can change the story. I think we can change the story, and Trinidad and Tobago can be at the leading point of that new story. Next steps, let's do it. Let's do it. We had a conversation with the Honorable Prime Minister before, and she said, this is very interesting, but how can I land this in the lives of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago? And the response is, let's move from problems to solutions. And we have seen a lot of action happen in the last five months. And Prime Minister, Mr. Ransom, Cabinet members, count on UNDP and, if I may, the wider UN family to be part of this conversation. That's our honor, our duty, and our pleasure. So happy to be part of this conversation. I will use the last 2 minutes of this event to say a big thank you. As you can imagine, putting together an event like this is not easy and requires a lot of bright minds and some good hands. So first and foremost, Honorable Prime Minister, thank you very much, not only for your leadership, but for your vision and your results-driven energy. When you mentioned it before, when we first met, I mentioned the Human Development Report, and I remember very well you said, I've been using that report for many years. And then you added, let's host it in Trinidad and Tobago. Let's show the world the work we are doing. And a few weeks later, here we are, Honorable Prime Ministers. Thank you for that. Dear Minister Sorat Singh, Minister of Planning, Economic Affairs and Development, and your fantastic team. As I hear very often saying in Trinidad and Tobago, you cook with gas. And it's not only the what, it's the how you do it. So thank you very much for such enriching and interactive pleasure. To the Office of the Prime Minister and the staff of the Diplomatic Center, thank you for your unwavering support and patience. You've been instrumental to making this a success. To the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, led by Mr. Sobers, thank you. I hope we got most of the things right, but I can say with certainty that none of this would have been possible without the guidance of Ms. Naran Singh and the team of protocol. Thank you very much. To all members of Cabinet, I hope this was enriching, useful, is giving you some ideas. As the Assistant Secretary General mentioned, the sustainable development is not an easy task and requires all hands on deck. So I'm looking forward to working with you and in a massive silo-breaking kind of exercise. I hope you found this dialogue meaningful. And to ambassadors and members of the diplomatic corps and partners of the institutions that are working with us, IDB, CAF, we have UTT, UV. Thank you for pushing us. Thank you for making us better. Thank you for the tough questions. Thank you for being partners and friends in this process. And then now to the UN family, to our SG. Michelle, I have to say this. I know you don't like it, but gracias. Thank you very much. Big thank you for your deliberate effort to put the realities of the Caribbean under the spotlight. I know it's not easy. I know we see that the C of the Caribbean is not just the last word of the LAC acronym. We see your work, we feel it, and we are very thankful. Thank you for wanting to have a specific emphasis on the Caribbean and on Trinidad and Tobago for this report. Thank you, Almudena. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Katarina. To Joanna Casana and the RC office, thank you for all the work you do in the UN family. It's a pleasure to be part of this big team. Thank you, Fain. Thank you, Renee. Very important contributions. And of course, to our UNDP team. I've seen this many times, but I never said this in front of the Honorable Prime Minister and the ESG. So let me say it once again. I've never worked in a better team. I never worked in a team with such committed professionals and human beings serving their country. Every day I feel honored and inspired by you. Thank you very much. And let me conclude with a confession. I have fallen in love with calypso and soca. I really did. And I have a 3-year-old son that he whines like crazy. So it's getting a little bit out of control. So let me finish these remarks, if I may, with lyrics from Black Stallion. Calypsonian from Trinidad and Tobago, I think from San Fernando, if I'm not wrong. I'm sure you know the song Caribbean Man. Don't worry, I'm not gonna sing. You're good. But I think the lyrics are very pertinent, and they go as follows. So we must push one common intention: for a better life in the region, for the women, for the children. And that must be the ambition of the Caribbean. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blanco. Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived at the conclusion of our formal proceedings. We will commence the process to capture the official photo op on the grand staircase in the foyer. We ask that all guests remain here in the room while our frontline dignitaries assemble on the staircase for the photo. After that photo op is complete, you will be able to exit to proceed to the cocktail reception. The first round for the photo op will comprise our frontline dignitaries, and the second phase of that photo op will include the members of cabinet. I now invite the Honorable Prime Minister, ASG Mouchette, Honorable Minister Swarat Singh, Ms. Fernandez, and Mr. Blanco to proceed to the foyer for the first phase of the official photo op. Honorable Ministers of Government will be kindly requested to follow thereafter with all other guests staying in here to enjoy some serenading again from our lovely panelist, Ms. Murrell. Please stand for the departure of the Honorable Prime Minister.